everybody, and welcome back to Deadlock Load, episode number 8. My name is Cryptic here with BSJ. What is up, man? How you doing?
Good. I leave for a trip to Italy with my girlfriend tomorrow, so I'm pretty excited about that. Never been to Italy before, and we're doing the classic 4 days of no technology, which is going to be really weird.
That's super cool.
Yeah, we're going to be detaching ourselves from the world of the internet and such, and I'm going to see what it's like to live without a computer screen or a phone for 4 days. The acclimation, expecting to be a bit strange, but I'm looking forward to it. How's your week going?
It's very good. I actually just got back in town like 2 days ago.
Where'd you go?
I was over in California for the weekend, and then just got back like Monday night.
Okay.
Yeah, Monday night. So looks like we're trading off a little bit.
Not doing anything for Thanksgiving, huh? Not doing anything for Thanksgiving?
Oh no, I do. My girlfriend and I are going to be doing some stuff here with her family. So I'm going to the store here today. I'm going to be cooking a bunch of stuff tomorrow and taking it over to their house. So yeah,
Nice.
it's gonna be a good weekend, good chill weekend.
Yeah, sweet, man. Well,
That's fun.
enough about food, enough about Italy, even though those are overlapping. We got some
Yeah.
we got some big stuff to talk about.
Absolutely, man. Valve saves Deadlock, dude. That's the best thing that I could put into words for this massive update that they just put out. It's been about a week now, or not, yeah, almost a week since this patch released. So we had a little bit of time to kind of read through the notes and kind of see how things have shaken up. But we spoke a lot in our last episode just about ranked and what we thought Valve could do. And then they kind of just did exactly what we talked about, which is fantastic.
I'm just letting you know I secretly work at Valve, and they just don't pay me. If anybody is interested in making sure I get compensated for my work there, that'd be fantastic. No, I mean, it seems like they're on the same wavelength as us when it came to the whole ranked system. And, you were like immediately, no! And I think they were more on my pace where they were like, initially, that seems like a good idea, which is what I thought. And then as time went on, we talked about, I think the main highlight you and I both mentioned was that we had groups of friends that kind of stopped playing together because people would randomly stop to go play ranked. And anything that disincentivizes,
that's right.
Grouping up and playing with friends in a game, I think is just going to be a slow but insidious killer of the player base. And so, yeah, you want to talk about the changes that they actually made? Because they didn't make like a full revert.
Correct. Yeah, this was you specifically asked me last week, right? Like, what could they do? Could Valve actually like just undo, ranked? And we kind of came to the conclusion that yes, they can. And my thought was the best thing would be to essentially combine the two queues and bring it back to kind of what it was before, which was essentially like a hidden MMR system. But what we have now is essentially one primary queue, no limited hours, but it is essentially a ranked mode, but it isn't solo queue only. Like, it's not an exclusively solo queue thing. So you can queue with friends, parties of any size, which is fantastic. Your MMR live updates per game, and they have reinstituted Hero MMR, which is a massive change because this is something that used to be in the game. I think right around the time Mirage was released was when Hero MMR was actually still being used. It ended up getting pulled and kind of reworked, and now they have put it back into the game. So you can kind of see which heroes you're higher than your what is known as your core MMR. So you have like a variance from that core MMR. And then your heroes that, you're not so good if you don't have a lot of games on them. If you go to play a game on them for like the first time, it's going to put you in a little bit of a more similar skill-based matchup in your lane, as opposed to playing against someone that you're like, on par with on your best hero, which I think is a great incentive to try new heroes instead of just like going to your lane and getting absolutely bodied.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you have an MMR system in a game, people, they want to climb, obviously. They want to see their improvement, and if people are spending a lot of time and effort on something, even if it's meant to be fun and in the terms of a video game, but they feel bad when they regress. And I feel like, you know, I think about Dota, for instance, as an example of a game with ranked around for a long time. It really makes people just so hesitant to play new heroes, like try new things, because as you gain MMR, it's more reflective of the heroes you actually play, and eventually people can even become one-tricks, where they get to a point where they're X amount of MMR, and every other hero is so, like, then the one they main is so much technically worse for them that they would lose MMR in chunks if they were to try anything else. So I think having a system that's meant to kind of compromise between making every game matter, and it matters towards your rank, but also allowing you to not feel pressured to try new things. I think that's a critical balance to hit, and this definitely leans in that direction. So that's what I was mainly concerned about if they combined ranked and unranked again, was that there was a pretty clear division of, like, ranked, you get to do all the stuff you're good at, unranked, you get to try stuff. But also it feels like if everyone's trying things, then maybe the integrity of the game isn't all that accurate, or like it's not as realistic of a simulation of what you'd be learning on this hero if you're playing against people who are trying. So maybe putting you against slightly worser people makes more sense for that, because you want your practice to be good at the end of the day rather than just pushing the buttons. So
I think there is something to be said as well. Like we touched, again, different things that we touched about in our last episode. If you guys wanted to hear the ranked episode, go listen to it. It's very good. But after this one, of course. But
we prophesized what already happened, so, you know, just we knew something.
It's like the writing was on the wall. I think you said a couple different times about, you know, what needed to change. And I think part of this whole, like, going back to a combined queue, allowing parties of any sizes, the game is still in beta. Like, this isn't like a fully fleshed out game where you can, like, go grind ranked for a month, because the game state is pretty stable and things aren't going to change much, and you can really show, like, I am this good at the game. It is changing so much. There are so many variables into every single match that, like, you don't have control over, and like in as compared to, like, something like Dota. And I just think, like, people that are only wanting to play this game as a solo ranked style game, like, there's a very vocal minority who took their pitchforks to Reddit and just complained about this matchmaking update. And it's, to me, I keep seeing I saw a lot of people being like, this game is now unplayable. Like, I don't want to queue with people I don't want to lose MMR because of other people. And in my eyes, like, they either, like, if you're dealing with that right now, my thought is you got to change your mindset about the game, because it's just not in that state that I think they want it to be. And if you can't change your mind on it, then maybe it's just you need to take a break and come back in, like, I don't know, 3 to 6 months when there's more of a fleshed out system. But for the community as a whole, I think a lot of people are looking at this as a massive win. Like, just hands down, this being, like, the overall single best patch that Valve has put out in quite a while.
You know, this is going to go into some philosophy for me. I've learned that, you know, there's generally two types of situations where I don't understand what is going on. And one is where the other party, when they're thinking something, they don't know what they're thinking. So it's impossible for me to read their mind, because they're not really thinking through their decision making. The other one is when the people making the decisions are just way either more, they've done more research on that specific topic, or they have understanding that I just don't have. And more so, it's encouraged me to be curious. Like, if I don't understand what's happening with something, or why somebody made this decision that seemingly slights me, you know, like, I want to play solo ranked and you're removing it from me. It's like, you know, I get that the gut reaction is to be mad, right? Anger makes sense as a gut reaction there. And I just encourage everybody, when people do something you don't understand, just step back for a second and ask, like, which one of the two reasons is it? Is because they didn't really think it through and they're just kind of winging it, which in that case, no ill will, right? They're just, you know, doing their best. Or is it Valve, who's infinitely better at designing games than you are, or me, or my friend Ricky here? So I guess just
how dare you?
Yeah, how dare you? Sorry, man. You're as good as Valve at designing games.
How dare you call me your friend?
Shit. Okay.
Got him. All right,
Got
I'm
him.
sorry.
Wham bam. Yeah, I mean, the people did whip out the pitchforks. I did see the posts. I think you and I were in the group of people that were very grateful for what they did. I'll say it again. I think I said it like 3 or 4 episodes ago, where I think making solo queue ranked the main form of like proving you're good at a game is just, it's been done. It's a lot of games have tried it, and I'll just tell you, every game that I've seen it done in, it ruins the fucking game. Like, I think it ruins the game. I think that, you know, the internet is a place where people lack accountability, and they don't, like, they're not encouraged to work with people or to honestly treat people like fucking human beings. So if you play solo queue ranked, like, that's just encouraging you to become individually really good while having absolutely no personal skills or like communication or being a good teammate. So I think these are things that if everyone is encouraged to do to be better at the game, is simply better in the long run. And it is a meaningful enough change that, or like a significant enough of a change that would not take effect immediately. Like it takes time to like shift the gaming culture in the right direction. And I think that at least allowing or encouraging party queue in ranked and not segregating it from solo queue is really important from my perspective. So I like that they did this for so many reasons. And there may be a day, like you said, where they bring it back. Like the game has enough player base and you can put solo queue in there. I'm just making the statement now. I would be perfectly content if they never did that, even if they have 10 million players. So, you know, just that's my perspective on that.
Yeah, and I do also want to mention that they did add, for people that, you know, just are of that mindset that solo queue is the only thing that matters, there is like a matchmaking preference to make solo queue your preferred option, but it's not guaranteed.
Which is
and
fine.
It's just one of those things like, hey, you're gonna likely get more solo players in your games, but there's this is a game that thrives by playing with friends. And so that's just going to be the experience for most people. And it's just, if that's something that you don't like, you can maybe still try and enjoy the solo queue experience. That's, you know, that's your way of playing the game. But yeah, I think you and I super excited. I got off the plane and literally read the patch notes. Like first few paragraphs, I was so stoked. So I'm really excited for what Valve is going to continue to do with the matchmaker over time. Just generally, I think this was a massive positive change. But I guess now we can try and talk about some of the meat of the patch itself outside of the matchmaker changes, some of the general changes to the game, which I think are kind of cool. Some reworks to just like objectives. We can start with power runes, a redesign on the idea of power runes, now requiring a heavy melee for you to actually claim them, which does make for some niche plays. Like at the high MMR brackets, a lot of people are waiting at the rune at rune spawn and would just kind of like walk in really quick and steal it. But now you can potentially make like a parry play and then steal it yourself. Yeah, I just think it makes it a more interactive and less of a like, oh, it's mine. I beat you by a quarter second or something, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think also the fact that they made it so the power runes are scaling over the course of the game makes a lot more sense than what it did originally. It felt like the 25 spirit power plus cooldown, for instance, at 10 minutes is like insane to give somebody 25 spirit power.
It was,
but yeah, it's just interesting. For me, I do just every change, I just ask myself, what aspect of gameplay were they trying to address? And I think like having it be who gets on top of the rune 0.1 seconds sooner, and it's like both people don't even interact with each other, they just bolt for the rune and they stand on top of it, and like, what if you're both sitting on it right at the 10-minute mark? Who gets it? It's like, that's not interesting, you know?
Yeah, it's a good word.
So I think overall, I look at the shift and I think I see what they're going for, and it makes sense, and it's cool. Like game design, as I said, like, wow, that's pretty impressive to think like, we don't like how that is. What's like a seemingly small change that we can make that shifts that in the right direction? And I think they did just that with the power runes.
Yeah, I think that was a good one. I think one of the other like general big like this is almost a quality of life improvement, but it does have a pretty large impact on the game. It's just the overall nerfs to healing and healing reduction just across the board. Like this was something that they know was a little bit too strong, and they actually had specifically a section of the patch notes where they're like, all right guys, here's all the healing notes, and then you can see them later as well, like on the specific hero stuff, but we needed to address healing and heal reduction completely across the board. Absolutely rebalanced everywhere. Almost every hero that has some form of healing built into their kit was nerfed, and all of the healing reduction items also got nerfed as well to compensate. So it just makes it, I'm trying to think like how, like in my brain how to like justify or like kind of wrap my head around how this affects the game overall. But teams that have like multiple healers on them now aren't like can't as easily just like bowling ball down a lane, and you cannot, and like make it impossible to stop them, you know?
I mean, every experience I have, because like obviously the patch has only been out for a week, so every experience I have in regards to how this would play out in the long run is from Dota, right? So it's the same in Dota as it is in Deadlock, where some of the best death ball strats are healing based, because heals almost always come from abilities, and usually to counter abilities like that you need items, right? So it's the same in Deadlock, where there was the abilities give heal, and I mean, obviously there's some items, but the majority of heroes that play on heals, they're from their abilities, and you had to buy Heal Bane, Toxic Bullets, etc. to deal with
Decay.
this, right? Yeah, so, and like Decay's single target, and like, it's just all this stuff. I just think that the point of it, that I didn't do the exact math, but the idea that I thought was like, if you have the normal healing abilities and a heal reduction item, it ends up being about the same as it was before. In regards to how much heal they're getting, because the abilities all got nerfed and the reduction percentage got nerfed. But if you don't have the items yet, you are losing, the enemy snowballing, or say you have Heal Bane on 2 of your heroes and they're just not able to trigger it on everybody on the enemy team, for instance, that it's just not as powerful without the counters. So I think having counters in the game in the form of items and heroes is really important, but it's also, you have to mitigate just the feels bad component of like, what if I don't have the answer in our lineup, or what if I don't have the money to buy the answer just yet? So yeah, I mean, I think it's like still a core part of the game, and I just really like when they do these type of changes. They have the same methodology of balancing in Dota, which is like, let's just make that a little bit less powerful if not dealt with, but it's still a viable strategy.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense. Like there's too many times when like a certain lane would go bad, and if it was a lane that had one of these snowball heroes like a McGinnis or a Kelvin, or even like a Dynamo, like they would just group up together, and it was so early in the game, you're just like, well, we can't actually stop them. So you just lose too much because they just sustain through whatever damage you can poke them with. And I think it helps with that. And then, like you said, it just overall like still makes it like a core component of the game, but just not as like potentially one-sided, which is great. Next big thing though, I would like to point out is something that we've seen them be doing tweaks to for almost every patch, which is the walkers. And they did a massive change for walkers. Once again, they now have added in an aura, similar to what we have in Dota 2. If you're near one of your tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 towers, you get an aura that gives you armor. And now in Deadlock, you get 25% bullet and spirit resistance near any of your walkers, which is very cool. It makes defending walkers a lot easier. You're not, as likely to just get chipped down from like bombs and like random abilities. But they also massively buffed the interior walkers. Your mid lane walkers, their HP went from 5,800 to 8,000. The freaking Giga Chad walkers in mid lanes now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best balance that I've felt throughout the course of the history of this game is when objectives are doable when the enemy is dead, but when the enemy is there to defend them, it should feel like they're hard to take. And it felt like over time, like especially the last few patches, people were just deathballing too easily, and it felt futile to try to defend your objectives if you were losing. And because of the soul sharing mechanics that they also reworked again, teams that were ahead like had no reason to even chase you around the map. You could just barrel down lanes, and it was so hard to defend. And then you also weren't getting enough when you were playing for the macro game. The fact is, this is a shooter, but it's also a MOBA. And I think as a carry player from Dota who likes to get a lot of money, I love the macro aspect of this game. I think it is absolutely essential that it feels like you have options on the map, and just overall map movements are a thing, like that they're a high indication of skill. But also the fact that, where was I going with this? That it feels like it's not conceptually too simple to play optimally by just grouping up, like having the decision of, do I group up or not? And it feels like the only way to take objectives really now is if you either apply multiple points of pressure, so like, you know, they can't actually respond to all of it at once, or you kill them first, which it is a shooter. So encouraging people to kill each other before taking objectives, I think is objectively, didn't mean to do that, but objectively good for the game. I think like you want people to want to fight each other. And so if you see a walker, you're like, well, I can't really take it if there's a single guy here anymore, and I can't harass them out. And also they get more resistance when you have more heroes there on the offensive team. So it also de-incentivizes whatever.
Like 6-hero pushing a walker.
Yeah, having a massive group trying to kill it. So the overall tilt of that balance, once again, it's like, is it possible to take walkers? Yes. But is it really good for the game if I get a 5k, 10k soul lead pretty early on that I'm just taking a mid lane walker, you know,
like by myself against 2 heroes?
And the answer is no. That's not fun. That's not good. Walkers are really important for map control in regards to like invading the camps around it and having extra ways to flank people in lanes. So, keeping them alive for the team that's behind, I think, is absolutely essential, and it won't make a huge difference like later on in the game when people are like doing so much damage that like the tower will die anyway. So
yeah, I absolutely agree. I think we've seen this trend on the walker updates for a while now. Like this is something that people have been trying to find like the balance on, and there's been a lot of different suggestions, and I think this one is just might be my favorite so far in terms of like how they are how they've been adjusting it. The fact that the mid lane walkers are way beefier than the side lane walkers means it doesn't necessarily punish teams that still need to get like a flex slot, and you can like still rat and push like some of the side lane walkers with that a lot easier, right? So you can still get that side lane walker down with 5100 health or whatever, 5200 health roughly, 5175, but it's like that's a huge difference in being able to potentially like open up a flex slot that way. But you have to commit. You have to make time to take the mid lane walkers now, and it's going to require, like you said, either heroes being already dead or being able to split your pressure into multiple lanes, and then they choose, right? If you can push a side lane walker and a mid walker at the same time with like a couple of people, that's like probably your best scenario, because then you're like, all right, well, we either easily take the side lane walker because it's a lot weaker, and we force them into mid, or if they over respond to the side lane walker, we might get the more important one, which is the mid lane walker. So I think overall this adds a lot more strategy to teams, just general solid improvement to the game. I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah, and I mean the other note that we had was the fact that the patron death, the first phase of the patron gives a 20-second death timer reduction for anyone on the enemy team who's currently dead. And I think one of the worst feelings in Deadlock was to have a game go late, because all these changes are going to make games go later, right, in general. And to like take one team fight, get wiped, and then the enemy just kills not only the first phase of the patron but also the second, which it may still be possible given how like much tower objective damage they have and stuff, but it makes that far less likely to occur. So I think whenever team fights can be so punishing that the game just instantly ends, it actually makes people not want to fight, right? It makes people actually afraid to make plays. And so literally everything I see here from these objective changes is encouraging killing each other, which, like I said, it's a shooter and it's also a MOBA. So the fact that they're encouraging you to not just group up and not play the macro game, but they're also encouraging activity in regards to interacting with opponents because it's not PvE, obviously. I think anything that the worst feeling in all of a MOBA is to see enemies in your vision and it feels like you can't do anything about it, and what they're doing is better than anything you could do. Like if they're grouping up as 4 and taking a walker, it's like I can't defend it and I don't feel like I'm being as efficient farming the map anyways. Like if that's how you feel, I think that is the literal worst feeling in all of MOBAs. And so all of this attempts to address that, and I think yeah, I'm really happy with these changes for sure.
Yeah. There's a lot more changes that we could go into as well. Like there's a ton in this patch, and I think you know, we depending on like what updates end up coming out this week, we'll look at them.
This is not a 6-hour long podcast, guys.
Yeah,
so we will not be doing
we could go into this for a while, but one of the things I do want to talk about from the patch is the fact that we got some new items and some really interesting ones, and one of them is a forum recommendation. So for those of you who maybe don't know this, you can recommend like different types of items and stuff through the Deadlock forums. And this isn't the first time we've seen an item added from the Deadlock forums. And this, I mean, we can just talk about this one first, I suppose. It doesn't really matter which order, but Spirit Snatch, which was added, and it is an upgrade. It's a tier 3 spirit upgrade from Spirit Strike. And the way it works is like when you actually melee someone, you steal spirit resistance and spirit power for 16 seconds. It has a 6-second cooldown, but if you hit multiple heroes, you receive multiple stacks. So it's kind of cool. I don't know. It's right now I'm kind of waiting to see what we're going to get out of it. I think the easiest hero that might be able to take advantage of this would be something like Viscous, because Puddle Punch counts as melee. And you can just spam it and get like 40, like 4 stacks immediately, and then that's kind of balanced. But it's definitely cool to see Valve like looking at something from the forums, but like, yeah, why not? We'll try that. It seems fun.
I mean, at the end of the day, having upgradable items is just fun for the game because it offers you more versatility in the late game when you're deciding, am I going to sell that cheap item and buy something new? Or like when you're dealing with slot issues, it's like all of a sudden you have more options, right? It just gives more options. I think itemization, having more options is always better. It may make the game a bit more complicated, but then at the same time, it's like, I don't know. I read this item and it's like, if I'm a melee guy, it's pretty clear I'd probably want this, right? Like, it synergizes with being tanky, and it also kind of gimps the offensive potential of the opponent. So, yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to have quality of life changes, and I think adding upgrades to items is a quality of life change because it makes it more, you are incentivized to buy the cheaper items that maybe previously you wouldn't have bought other than in like the first 10 minutes or something. You can now consider buying this item as like a mid-game item that will then be upgraded later. You know, with that in mind, I'll shout out the next one. We have Spellslinger Headshots, which is an upgrade from Soul Shredder Bullets. And it makes it so it's kind of like a combination of that item itself with also crippling headshot in a way, which is landing a headshot on an enemy hero increases your total spear power by 3% for 12 seconds, which kind of makes it a late game item in and of itself because it's percent scaling. You can get stacks up to 12 with a cooldown of 1.5. I assume that works by having cooldown reduction or like duration extender. Like that's the only way you can get, because by math you'd only be able to get 8 stacks, but I assume.
Well, I think it just like the stacks are non-expiring, so like as long as you keep getting headshots,
it like
stack
refreshes
resets.
the duration.
Yeah. It refreshes and adds a stack. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's how I understand it reading that. Otherwise, yeah, the math doesn't work out. So I was like, all right, it has to be that the stack resets or something.
I mean, I know from Dota that everything stack based is like individually, like on an individual basis. So like, I'm not going to act like there's some consistency here across like everything that has stacks. So that makes sense from what you're saying. That's almost certainly the case. I mean, once again, I like the idea. I think it is a late game item though, because of the percent based scaling. But Soul Shredder Bullets was an item that like gave you sustain and a little bit of damage. So it's kind of like, do I get rid of that for Leech, for instance, if I'm running low on slots, or now I have the option to keep the damage while also keeping the sustain? So it just once again, more flexibility, another upgrade. I think that's overall just good for the game.
Yeah, it's the internal cooldown I think helps balance this a little bit. I am curious like what it can get down to with things like cooldown reduction. Of course, like maybe you can get it into the 1 second interval and then it's a little bit easier to build the stacks. But now that there's now multiple weapon items with spirit scaling damage on them, we could see a return of some heroes that benefit from them. Heroes specifically like Seven, um, as well as like Grey Talon or even Haze now, which she has a ton of spirit builds, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, it's a cool item. I like having that variety. And I think in general, Soul Shredder is like one of my most purchased items in this game because I play a lot of heroes that buy it. So I was like, well, this will be fun. So I haven't had a chance to actually buy this in a game yet because there's a lot of other stuff that I want to get first. And like you said, it does kind of feel like a late game item despite being a tier 3, which is interesting. But yeah, I think it's a cool item, very cool addition. And then there was one more called Arcane Surge, which is a spirit item. And this is a kinetic dash upgrade. So similar to what we saw in a previous patch where they moved Enduring Spirit to have a spirit upgrade. We now have a weapon item, kinetic dash, that upgrades into a spirit item. And this means that whenever you successfully dash jump, you do the passive on kinetic dash, your next ability now has 20% range, 20% duration, and 20 spirit power, which I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, man, out of all the heroes I build kinetic dash on, which you could build it on a lot of heroes, who takes advantage of that active the most? And I was like, probably heroes that didn't build kinetic dash previously. So maybe we'll see a lot more kinetic dash build up on heroes that, didn't build it previously. I don't know.
I mean, to be honest, like even a hero like Haze would be kind of cool, because you use this and then use ulti, for instance, like that with 20% range, 20% duration, 20 spear power. That makes a lot. Like
pretty big, actually.
Yeah, I'm thinking of I'm thinking like the main application of items that change slots. Are heroes that previously have way too many items in orange, for instance, in this case, and then they're freeing up a slot for another orange item by buying this. So Haze is like a perfect example of a hero that doesn't generally fill her purple slots while she does fill her orange. So, and she would buy kinetic dash. So I guess that's just an example, but for me, I just like the versatility of slot, like the fact that like the slot distribution is the way it is. It just adds another layer where it's like, I need an orange slot. Oh yeah, I have an option here. Rather than selling something, I can upgrade this to purple, and then I have one. So yeah, I mean that's why I like this the most. It definitely needs to be for some very important ability, because it's not like you get these buffs for 10 seconds or something. You get these buffs for one ability. So
yep.
It wouldn't be good with like spam abilities. I think it would only be good with stuff that has high impact. So a little bit limited there, but I mean, you mentioned in the item notes we have the change to silencer. I'll just say that item felt like shit. Like it felt so bad to push a button, then shoot somebody, and I don't know, it just felt weird to me. So, and it also like frees up an active slot if you were to buy the item. So it works like toxic bullets now, where you build it up rather than having to activate it to silence people. So it also prevents like the insta silence mechanic. So I think it's not as bad to play against, but it's also not as bad. It doesn't feel as bad to use either. So they gave the slow component to Lucky Shot, and has that build up from the slowing bullets now. So silencer's cheaper effectively because it doesn't have the 1250 build up. Yeah, I mean, once again, seems to be the theme of the patch for me is just all of these seem like positive quality of life gameplay changes to things that weren't bad. They could have just been better, is like the way I kind of think about it. So
the other thing about silencer that is interesting is it's now a defensive weapon damage. Like it's a defensive weapon item. Like on the which is a little bit weird because it is like it gives you weapon damage and it silences, but it now has spirit resistance and debuff reduction built
Yeah.
into it. So it's like heroes that want to build silencer are kind of these like glass cannony type heroes, not the item, but like are just heroes that do a lot of weapon damage and are sometimes seen as semi squishy. But you just get 20% debuff reduction and 15% spirit resist on top of the like just the passive buildup, and it frees up a different active. I like this just way more conceptually. Maybe we'll see how it ends up going in terms of like if it's too weak or too strong, but I like the idea of this definitely more than the previous iterations. I think this is a cool rework for sure.
I also think it was tough to find a 6.2k gold item for non-shooting heroes, like heroes that didn't primarily rely on their gun late game, which this actually gives them a way to kind of like in a way be utility to the team. It's kind of like its own version of inhibitor in regards to silencing and reducing spirit damage output when you activate it. So the fact that it gives you a little bit of durability but also utility means that it's an orange item that's not strictly damage, so that gives hero, like I'm thinking like, you know, the kinetic dash upgrade gives you the ability to buy more purple items on shooting heroes, and this gives you the ability to buy more orange items on a non-shooting hero. So I just always felt bad if you had like 6 spirit items on some utility hero and you're like 2 free orange slots and you just have nothing to do with it mid to late game. So yeah, I think they're just trying to offer options to in the different colored categories, which I think is an important and like insanely nuanced aspect of this game that they're working with. So it's kind of like a new frontier in regards to item balancing that I've never seen. So definitely interesting, and I like overall what they're going for.
I'm not sure if we had many other like massive item changes that we wanted to talk about, other than the fact that they kind of standardized interactions on a lot of the projectile or castable items to where like now they don't interrupt sliding. They have the same cast delay, stuff like that, which I think is just generally nice because certain items you would like chase after your hero, start sliding and throw, and then you would like stop sliding and your momentum would die, and you're like, oh, that was awkward. So yeah, they're kind of just like standardizing some of those, which I think was great. But there were some heroes that got like this patch specifically, like either a significant change to their like abilities or just like buffs across the board, which were kind of interesting. And then I think we could like maybe end the episode on like an idea of like what heroes are, you know, maybe got some of the biggest changes.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go a bit out of order because it's the hero I've played the most historically, and that's Haze. So the part you wanted to highlight was the fact that they changed the way Smoke Bomb works, which is that it's a little bit lower cooldown by default, and now you get the bonus move speed at level 1, which means it allows for a much more roaming, ganking Haze, even like super early on in the lane where you push the wave and go make something happen with Dagger. And then it also turns into a survivability tool once you max it out. You can buy extra charges for it if you want. They allow that once you get the level 5 upgrade out. And it gives 0.5 seconds of invulnerability that you can still move. So getting yourself out of a tight bind with multiple charges especially, like you can do a lot with 1 to 1.5 seconds of movement. And you're also... yeah, I mean, you're also fizzling out incoming projectiles during this time, so you can also use it to dodge key things. Just adds a bit of skill there. But the part I also wanted to highlight was rather than Bullet Dance being plus bullet damage now, it's also just plus spirit damage. And they made it so plus spirit damage per bullet with spirit scaling on it. So I feel like Haze has almost received an entirely different identity as a hero. She's being able to be more active. You can probably build spirit items much more viably than before because they buff the damage of your ultimate, and you're much more of an actual assassin rather than, like you mentioned off podcast, but also I think I called her this in the previous episodes, was anti-mage style gameplay, which is to literally be a hardcore farmer with no ability or desire to interact with opponents. So, going off the theme earlier about the objectives, giving a hero an ability to be a part of the game much earlier on. I think the idea of having a carry in the game is cool and all, but it's not fun to be on the team with a Haze and be like, just gotta buy her some time, just gotta wait till she's online. Like, that's just not fun for a lot of the people you're playing with. She kind of, in my opinion, became like the Tinker of Deadlock, which is just a hero that nobody really wants on their team, and also hates playing against because you have to kill her, and eventually she just kills you with one button. So they've really gone away from that. Obviously, in the previous patches, having removed like the extra target from her ultimate over time, so she wasn't a ult bot in fights. She's more of a assassin, and I think that's just a more interesting identity, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I agree. I think heroes that just run around and hit creeps all game it's a boring way to play. And clearly Valve, with a lot of the changes that they've been making, they, in terms of nerfing the jungle, making lanes more incentivized and hero kills more incentivized, it's like heroes that were really good at just jungling and nothing else for 25 minutes just felt like they didn't have a place in the game. And I think this gives her definitely a new identity to an extent. So I like it a lot. I think it's great changes. One of the other heroes that seemed like kind of got like an interesting series of buffs was Shiv. They basically took every single one of his base abilities, made them stronger, and then did an equivalent nerf to like either the tier 1 or tier 2 of each of the abilities upgrades, because they felt like the hero's base kit was a little bit too weak over after like having nerfed it over time. And this is actually like a pretty unique way, or kind of a cool way, that they can balance it because of how the ability upgrades work. So like, for instance, they're like, all right, well, we're gonna like make Slice and Dice's base damage go up by 5, but then the tier 2's base damage is gonna be reduced by 5. So it's the same amount of damage when you get to tier 2, but it just makes the hero without those specific upgrades slightly better. They gave him a lot of these, so we'll see if it ends up being too much. But I think overall, cool buffs to Shiv, and if you're a Shiv player right now, you're probably very happy about this.
I mean, in general, I think it should not feel bad to have all your skills maxed out, but it should also, like, there should be some versatility in the build order, and I feel like, yeah, maybe in the past there was like a bit of a decision between maxing Dagger or Dash first, but I feel like on Shiv, the He was always like, you maxed out 2 abilities and left the other ones at 0, basically, and I feel like they're trying to reward you for keeping them at 0, but also not having to max everything, but then it's still potentially worth going 1 or 2 points in every ability, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, more balanced.
Yeah, I feel like they were originally trying to make it so you couldn't leave bloodletting at 1 point or 0 points, and that was like their way of saying, okay, stop maxing kinetic, or stop maxing Slice and Dice with no points in anything else. But instead, it's like, well, you want people to have a choice, and it's like now you needed points and everything prior to this patch. I think that's what it felt like to play Shiv, and so yeah, they just made that a little bit better. Once again, it just feels like they're playing the game, and they're listening to people, and just on the mark with those type of changes. And yeah, that's. I continue my theme of this podcast episode. Bless you. Nobody listening in saw that, but I saw my man sneezing. Not my friend.
Yeah, it's all right. I'm muted. Yeah. We cleared that up earlier.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's some other heroes that got some pretty like interesting changes. I think one that's just funny that I want to mention was the change to McGinnis turrets now having a much, like literally half the cycle time that they did previously. And cycle time just kind of refers to the rate of fire. So it is very funny when McGinnis sets up some turrets and then throws the spinner, like the heal under them. They just sound like Gatling guns now. It is hilarious. They don't do any more damage, but when you just hear them in a lane, it's way more terrifying to just see like these 3 turrets just ripping through bullets like crazy. It's really good.
I mean, McGinnis has always been about the mental damage, so they're really buying into that one with it feels way more menacing. even if it's the exact same amount of damage.
They did change the way the turret's HP works now. So like in late game, they scale a little bit better in terms of survivability. They can only take like 1/3 of their health per second from any damage source. So um, anything that was over that basically just goes into the following second. So it's almost like its own mini form of bloodletting. Uh, but it basically the way that they described it is turrets now will always live at least 3 seconds. So this is a really cool way of turrets like not just getting instantly bopped by either like a heavy melee, because that was happening all the time too, is like a Mo or an Abrams would just walk up to the turrets and just melee them and they'd die. But now you can't do that. You can only you just, it makes it a lot better. So I'm actually curious about trying McGinnis a little bit now. She could be kind of fun. I just want to see the Gatling guns in action.
I mean, it's really important though, is they gave Mo and Krill specifically the ability to burrow underneath the wall. So
that's so cool.
Yeah, I like little interactions between heroes being unique. I think that's something that Valve has always done in their balancing. So stuff like that, I'm like, it's gonna be a little annoying to have to remember that in the future. If I like when I'm on either side, make sure I make use of it. When I'm Mo and Krill, make sure I prepare for it if I'm McGinnis. But at the same time, I do like those type of changes. Having unique interactions is interesting at the end of the day.
Yeah, I actually will have to test like if you can actually stun him out of burrow with like the tier 3 wall if you like hit him like where he is. But I'll test that later.
Your
It's not
guess
like
is as
super
good as mine.
important, but yeah, I have no idea because on paper I'm like it probably should stun him, but if he can go under it, maybe he's just completely unaffected now. So I don't know, but overall, very fun patch.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we're closing up our thoughts, so I'll give my what I learned for this week because this is one of our staples of the podcast. And what I learned was when I read these patch notes, and obviously they now made the inner walkers much more much tankier than the outer ones, but before the patch they had more HP already. It was 5800 versus the 5175. I remember reading this patch and being like, oh, they had different HP already? Like, what? So yeah. I think it's like one of those things where as much as I would like to think, you know, with my Dota expertise that I can try to imagine how much nuance and specificity there is to their balancing of this game, that was a moment where I was like, damn, that's just another example where like they already thought that through, what you were mentioning about like the split pushing and holding on to certain walkers and stuff. So I just thought that was funny that, yeah, they made it like a much larger gap discrepancy between the HPs, but the fact that that even existed in the first place, I was like, oh, I knew that, you know?
Yeah, totally knew that. Yeah, I know. I read it the same way, and when it said that, it was like Sidewalker's HP is 5175. I'm like, what? Didn't realize they were even different.
People at home, be honest. Percentage of you that actually knew that. Come on. Like now, like the HP discrepancy is so massive, you probably notice it even if you didn't read the patch notes. But like, come on, like nobody fucking knew that, you know?
You definitely like feel it, like looking back on it now, and you're like, yeah, it always did feel like I could like nuke down a Sidewalker on heroes
faster.
like Wraith or McGinnis a little bit faster, but it was also like potentially a placebo of like, well, there's just less heroes that can be here, so I can take it faster, you know, or something.
Yeah.
But turns out they were actually just weaker. Yeah, that was an interesting patch note I did not know. What I learned this week is to not get too used to where the camp locations are gonna be because they keep changing. Okay, so last week or not last week, but the previous patch, they moved the position on what I like to refer to as the loser camps. They were the camps that were like sitting behind yellow and purple, like behind your walkers. I refer to them as the loser camps because the only time you should ever take them is if you're getting so bodied in lane that you can't even show your face. And they moved them, and I finally figured out where they were, and then they moved again, and I was like, God damn it. So yeah, I do think like this change was generally really good, and so in terms of playing the solo lanes, you have a few more camps that you can actually access, where in the past, the mid lanes were really the only lanes that you could like easily jump off lane for like 30 to 40 seconds, clear camp, and come back. So with the new position of these camps, what I learned is like you can actually play to increase your farm quite a bit more in solo lanes than you could previously. So it was kind of nice.
Yeah, my theory is that they probably understood, generally speaking, the demographic of players that were farming those camps, aka the losers, and they realized they probably needed a bit of an incentive to explore the map. And so these are probably the same people that aren't reading patch notes. So they're probably trying to convince you to first explore the map, but also that perhaps these neutral creeps are sentient and are actually dodging you on the map if they consistently change them enough. So that's my theory. There's somebody at Valve that, you know, living under a bridge, feeling their inner troll, and they're just like, yeah, they're getting comfortable. Time to move them again. And then, you know, so stay tuned for next week's big patch where those creeps have now migrated to a different rooftop or a different
interior building somewhere that like has one entrance.
Some new hallway that wasn't even there previously, and now it's there, and they're just lurking, waiting for you to find them and finally bring them down. But you know, all jokes aside, you know, it is funny to think that everyone probably has their own definition or like idea of like the types of people that do certain things in the game. And the old camps, the loser camps that you called them, definitely makes sense. That was the only time that I was farming those. Not that I ever lost my lane, but
of course not.
Yeah, of course not. Never. Yeah. But yeah, no, I thanks for sharing.
Yeah, no, it's been a fun episode. I'm really looking forward to, you know, where Deadlock's going to go after these updates, because this is probably one of the biggest patches we've had in a while. I mean, the ranked update patch was definitely big in terms of adding it, but it didn't really like change the game a whole lot. This was like some major changes to the overall meta, to the way Deadlock can be played, and I think that they've almost all been pretty solid and very positive. So I like it. Thank you, Valve, for saving this game, Crappa. But no, this has been a very fun week of Deadlock.
And my application's already been sent, Valve. Please feel free to hire me officially for ideas for Deadlock, as you know, I'll wait for whatever we talked about in this episode to be in the next patch. I don't think we gave any suggestions for next patch.
Yeah, but, no predictions. That'll be on next week's episode.
Okay, we'll save it. We'll save it for next one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, everyone, we just want to say thank you so much for tuning in, whether that be, you know, on Spotify or on YouTube. But you guys make sure to follow these channels, and we'll see you guys next week for episode number 9 of Deadlock and Load. Have a wonderful night, everybody.
Peace.